You've been sold the wrong form of strength. Not because discipline doesn't matter, because the specific discipline you were taught to admire, the daily restraint, the consistent saying no, the constant tracking, is one of the most expensive habits in personal finance, and almost no one frames it that way. Think about the last time you said no to something, a purchase you almost made, a subscription you talked yourself out of at the last second, a meal out you skipped, you probably felt good about it. You exercised real control. But here's what no one tells you about that exact moment. It costs something, not money, something harder to replace. Every act of resistance, every impulse overridden, every temptation defeated draws from the same finite reserve inside you. By mid-afternoon, after a full day of making the disciplined choice, of counting, of choosing the harder option, that reserve is nearly empty. That's precisely when the expensive decisions happen, not because you failed, because the system ran out of fuel. And if you've been running on that system for years, the exhaustion you feel around money is not weakness. It's information about a structural problem nobody pointed you toward. In the next few minutes, I want to show you something that most personal finance content will never tell you, because it directly contradicts the most profitable message in this industry. That discipline is the answer. It isn't, or more precisely, the type of discipline most people practice is the wrong tool for the problem they're actually trying to solve. Here's the paradox. Discipline, in the way most people apply it, functions like a resistor in an electrical circuit. A resistor doesn't stop the current, it slows it. And in slowing it, it converts energy into heat, wasted heat. The more resistance in the circuit, the more energy you lose, not to useful work, to friction. That's what resistance-based financial discipline looks like from the outside, not a wall against spending. A constant friction that burns cognitive energy without ever changing the structure of the circuit itself. The disciplined person wakes up every morning and re-enters the same environment, same apps, same stores, same default options engineered toward consumption, same temptations waiting in the same places. They resist, they exhaust themselves, they resist again, and at the end of the month, after all that effort, the circuit looks exactly as it did on day one. The wiring hasn't changed, only the person is more tired. Now picture someone who builds wealth quietly, no elaborate system, no spreadsheet with color-coded categories, no visible routine they perform in front of anyone. What they did, often only once, sometimes years ago, was redesign the circuit itself. They didn't add more resistance, they removed the conditions that required it. They never started certain subscriptions, so there's nothing to cancel. They deleted the retail apps, so there's no midnight scroll to resist. They automated their savings before the money was visible. They made impulse spending structurally slower than preservation. The defaults in their life point toward wealth, not because they're choosing it every single day with moral effort, but because they built an environment where wealth is simply the path of least resistance. Stoic philosophy has a concept called premeditatio, the practice of mentally previewing future hardship to prepare your response in advance. But these quiet wealth builders do something different. They reverse the exercise entirely. Instead of imagining the temptation and preparing their willpower, they restructure the present so the temptation never loads. Think carefully about what that means. The disciplined person fights a battle every day. The minimalist architect never arrived at the battlefield. One performs strength continuously. The other made a single strategic decision and stopped needing strength for that particular domain of their financial life. The difference between those two approaches isn't income, it isn't intelligence, it's where the discipline gets spent. Here's where this gets genuinely uncomfortable. If you've spent years being proud of your discipline, your ability to resist, your tracking systems, your financial toughness, this reframe might feel threatening. It's not. What I'm describing isn't the absence of discipline. It's discipline used once at the architectural level with permanent returns, instead of discipline used daily, exhaustingly, with no structural change to show for it. The people quietly building wealth aren't more disciplined than you in the moment-to-moment sense. They were disciplined at the moment they decided what kind of environment to build around themselves. After that decision, the environment does most of the work. Your discipline is real. The question is whether it's being applied where it can compound or where it simply burns. And here is the layer almost no one talks about. The loop has a cost that compounds over time. Every day you run resistance-based discipline, resist, recover, you build a neural association between financial health and exhaustion. Your brain begins to link saving money with suffering, with denial, with being the person who can't have things. Spending, by contrast, becomes associated with relief, with recovery, with the reward your nervous system gives you for surviving another stretch of restraint. This isn't a character flaw, it's operant conditioning. You trained your own nervous system to use spending as medicine for the pain of not spending, and the prescription refills every time discipline breaks down. It's one of the most invisible and expensive cycles in personal finance, and naming it directly changes everything, because once you see the loop, you stop trying to run it harder and start asking how to exit it entirely. The minimalist wealth builder doesn't face this cycle, not because they have exceptional willpower, but because they never built the association. When spending requires more deliberate friction than preserving, the default behavior shifts quietly, without the daily battle. Without the guilt that follows the relief that follows the guilt. A frugality system that works isn't one you maintain through heroic effort. It's one that maintains itself because the environment was designed to point toward the right outcome automatically. The honest part of this is difficult to sit with, because it means that what you've been measuring as financial virtue, the daily restraint, the tracking, the saying no, may be generating the very fatigue that makes the loop inevitable. Not because you're wrong to resist, because resistance without redesign is a treadmill, the effort is real, the structural movement is zero. So what does the redesign look like in practice? The first move is friction architecture. Make spending require more deliberate effort than preserving. Remove save payment information from every app. Create a 48-hour rule for any purchase above a threshold you define, not to think harder about it, but because friction alone dissolves most impulse spending before the decision even forms. Delete the retail apps, not as deprivation, as environmental design. In a well-built financial life, the path of least resistance should always lead toward your goals. The second move is defaults that do the work. Automate savings on payday before the balance is visible to you. Automate investment contributions the same way. The person who saves whatever is left at the end of the month almost never saves anything meaningful. The person who automated it at the beginning almost always does. That gap isn't discipline, it's architecture. The third move is the hardest to accept. Stop adding complexity. Every new tracking category, every new rule you create to enforce better spending habits, every new system you adopt, these are additional acts of willpower required indefinitely. In financial minimalism, simplicity is the advanced strategy. Not because it's easier to manage aesthetically, but because fewer decision points means fewer moments where the circuit needs to run on resistance. This is where wealth habits form permanently, not in the daily effort, but in the initial design. The wealth-building strategy that works isn't the one you work hardest at, it's the one that works while you're not thinking about it. The shift I'm describing isn't about becoming less disciplined. It's about recognizing that the most powerful form of self-mastery isn't the daily capacity to resist, it's the wisdom to build a life where resistance is rarely required. That's what intentional living means at the structural level, not fewer possessions as an aesthetic, fewer environments that drain you, fewer defaults working against your financial goals, a life that runs on design, not daily heroism. When your defaults serve your goals, discipline becomes a reserve, something you keep available for the decisions that actually deserve it. The question worth sitting with isn't how to be more disciplined. It's this: how many of your current money habits are acts of daily resistance you could eliminate permanently with one architectural decision? Not fix, not manage better with stronger willpower. Eliminate by changing what the environment makes easy. Because the people quietly building wealth aren't winning through toughness. They designed a life where the right outcome is what happens by default. If this reframes something about your own spending habits, drop a comment below with one environment you plan to redesign, not resist harder. Redesign. Subscribe for more content like this. The next video might challenge something else you've been calling a virtue.